Childhood love is supposed to last forever. But for Daniel and Emma, it ended with betrayal, fear, and tragedy. He thought he had found his forever love, the same girl he once played with as a child. But sometimes the sweetest memories hide the darkest truths. Daniel and Emma were the picture of a perfect love story. Childhood sweethearts who grew up together, drifted apart, and then reunited in the most romantic way possible. To the world, their marriage was destiny fulfilled. But what no one knew was that Emma carried a darkness inside her, a mind sharper and more dangerous than anyone imagined. Behind her graceful smile hid secrets that would turn their fairy tale into a chilling crime story. One that ended not with love, but with betrayal, fear, and death.
Is it possible to ever truly know the person you love?
Daniel's life had always carried a rhythm of quiet simplicity. He was the kind of man who valued the little things, a warm cup of tea in the morning, the comfort of routine, and the gentle familiarity of the town where he had grown up. Yet within that simplicity lived a memory that colored everything he did. It was the memory of Emma, the girl who had once been his companion in childhood games, his secret inspiration during long school days, and the silent keeper of his first feelings of love. Even as years passed and life moved forward, she remained like a candle glowing in the back of his mind. When Emma returned after more than a decade away, Daniel could hardly believe it. She was no longer the carefree teenager he remembered running barefoot through the fields. She had grown into a woman of grace, her beauty sharpened by time, her presence commanding in a way that drew attention wherever she went. The first time he saw her again was at the marketplace, where she stood among a crowd, laughing softly at something a vendor said. The sound of her laughter pulled Daniel backward into the past. It was as though nothing had changed, yet everything had. Their reunion unfolded with an ease that felt destined. Conversations flowed, old memories resurfaced, and new promises were formed without being spoken. For Daniel, it was as if fate had carefully drawn them together again, stitching back the thread that had once broken when Emma left town. Neighbors and friends looked on with admiration, remarking how rare it was for childhood sweethearts to find their way back to each other. The wedding that followed became one of the most celebrated events in the town's recent memory. People filled the church, flowers decorated the aisles, and whispers spread among the crowd about how pure and lasting such a love must be. Daniel, overwhelmed with happiness, believed he had reached the peak of his life's journey. He often thought of his marriage as a reward for the years of patience and longing he had endured. The woman he once only dreamed of had now become his wife, sharing his home, his days, and his future. Emma too seemed perfectly content, smiling with a calm serenity that assured everyone around her of her devotion. Together, they appeared to embody the dream of a love story that had traveled across years, distance, and silence only to bloom again with even greater beauty. But beneath the surface of these perfect beginnings, there was something fragile, like glass that shines brightly yet can shatter at the slightest touch. Daniel could not see it then, nor could anyone else. To the world, Emma was a symbol of elegance and charm, her presence lighting up every room she entered. To Daniel, she was the embodiment of loyalty and destiny fulfilled. Yet within her, hidden from even the closest gaze, lay truths and desires that no one could have imagined. While Daniel dreamed of a future built on trust and companionship, Emma carried shadows from her past, shadows that would one day creep into their lives and reveal how fragile even the most beautiful love stories could be. At first, Daniel dismissed the subtle changes he noticed after marriage as simple adjustments that came with living together. Emma sometimes grew quiet for long stretches, staring out of the window as though her thoughts were far away. She would suddenly disappear into town, claiming she needed errands, but she rarely returned with anything in her hands. At night, she often lay awake, her eyes open in the dark, her breathing uneven while Daniel pretended to sleep beside her. He told himself it was nothing, that everyone carried small worries into their new life, and love was about patience and trust. But soon, his patience began to clash with the faint unease creeping into his heart. Money was the first real sign that something wasn't right. It began with a missing bill here and there, amounts so small that Daniel convinced himself he had simply forgotten where he placed them. Then he noticed that withdrawals from their shared account were happening without his knowledge. At first, it was only a few $100s, easy to overlook. but as time passed, the missing amounts grew into thousands. When he gently asked Emma, her explanation was calm and convincing. She said she had been helping a relative in need, a cousin with debts too shameful to share with the family. Daniel wanted to believe her, and so he did, even though the excuse felt incomplete. Love made him blind to the possibility of deceit. Still, there were whispers that refused to be silenced. A neighbor mentioned seeing Emma at a diner outside town late at night, a place Daniel had never known her to visit. Another neighbor swore he saw her near a pawn shop, exchanging a gold bracelet for cash. When Daniel confronted her indirectly, Emma laughed and dismissed it as gossip, insisting that people were jealous of their happiness. Her eyes shone with such conviction that Daniel silenced his doubts again, even though a quiet ache began to live inside him. The ache grew heavier the day he stumbled upon the locked box. He hadn't been searching for secrets. He was simply cleaning their study when his hand struck the edge of something hidden deep in the drawer. The box was small, covered in a thin layer of dust, and its lock looked fragile. Curiosity overcame him. Inside, neatly folded papers lay stacked together, receipts of large money transfers signed in Emma's name, connected to strangers Daniel had never met. More disturbing were the photographs. Some showed Emma sitting in dimly lit rooms, her face partially shadowed. Others placed her in front of unfamiliar buildings, dressed in clothes unlike anything she wore at home. Daniel stared at the images for what felt like hours. They told a story of a woman he didn't recognize, a life he had never been part of. His heart raced with fear and disbelief. Could the woman he loved so deeply be hiding such a world behind her smile? The realization tore at him. He wanted to confront her, but he knew that once spoken, the truth could never be undone. He placed everything back in the box, locked it again, and slid it into the drawer. Yet, from that day forward, Daniel lived with the torment of knowing his perfect marriage was built on something he no longer understood. Daniel's nights grew longer as he pieced together the fragments of Emma's hidden life. Every clue he uncovered seemed to contradict the image of the woman he thought he knew. The box of receipts and photographs had opened a door that could not be closed, and through that door poured truths that chilled him. He began to investigate quietly, following Emma's patterns when she thought he was at work, retracing her steps to places she had claimed never to visit. The puzzle of her life grew clearer with every discovery, and what he learned turned his love story into something darker. Emma had not simply been living in another city before their reunion. She had been building a reputation in circles Daniel never imagined. She had slipped into the underworld of gambling, not as an addict, but as a manipulator. She knew how to study people, how to read the smallest flicker in their eyes, and she used that skill to control outcomes, to twist games into her favor. But gambling was not her only path. It was only the beginning. She learned to charm men with wealth and influence, drawing from them money, favors, and secrets. To those men, she was irresistible, and to Emma, they were nothing more than pieces on a board she could move at will. As Daniel dug deeper, he realized that Emma's intelligence had been both her greatest gift and her most dangerous weapon. She thrived on risks, on the thrill of controlling others, on the satisfaction of leaving no trace. But the world she entered was not forgiving. In her pursuit of power and gain, she betrayed the wrong people, men who had invested more than money, people who did not tolerate being fooled. Enemies gathered silently behind her, waiting for the chance to strike back. Daniel's heart ached as he tried to reconcile this reality with the woman who shared his home. At night, she prepared dinner with a calm smile, her hands delicate as they placed food on the table. She spoke of future plans, of building a family, of trips they could one day take together. Yet behind her gentle tone, Daniel could now see the edge of something else, a sharpness in her gaze, a quiet calculation in the way she observed everything around her. The warmth she offered him felt real, but it was layered with shadows he could no longer ignore. What frightened him most was realizing that their marriage might not have been built on rekindled love at all. Emma had not returned to him by chance. She had not simply followed her heart back to the boy she once adored. She had returned because she needed cover. Marriage to Daniel, a man respected and trusted in their quiet town, was the perfect disguise for a woman trying to bury a dangerous past. He was her shield, her mask, the wall that separated her from those who hunted her. The knowledge struck Daniel with a cruelty he had never known. He had given her his devotion without question, and in return, he had become a pawn in her desperate attempt to survive. Yet even with this bitter truth pressing against his heart, a part of him could not let go of her. His love, built over years of longing and memory, refused to vanish in an instant. He clung to the belief that somewhere beneath the layers of deceit, the Emma he once knew still existed. It was this hope, fragile and stubborn, that kept him silent, even as the storm of her past drew closer to their door. Daniel's days became a blur of unease after the night he returned to a ransacked home. The message scrawled across the wall, crude and threatening, clung to his mind with a weight he could not shake. It was no longer whispers, no longer faint suspicions. The danger Emma carried inside her past had found its way into their present life, breaking through the fragile walls of secrecy she had built. Seeing her trembling on the floor, terrified in a way she had never shown before, shattered the illusion Daniel had been holding onto. For once, Emma could not hide behind her calm smile. Fear had stripped her mask away, and what remained was a woman hunted by shadows she could never escape. After that night, the atmosphere in their home shifted permanently. Every sound outside became a signal of danger. Every knock at the door sent a shiver through Daniel's spine. He began noticing the smallest of things: the car that lingered too long on their street, the silhouette that stood near the lamppost across the road, the anonymous letters slipped into their mailbox with grainy photographs of Emma attached. The images captured her in moments he had never witnessed, walking into places she had sworn she never visited, speaking to people who looked like predators more than acquaintances. The message was clear. Her enemies wanted her to know they were close, and they wanted Daniel to feel it too. Emma changed in ways that unsettled him further. She grew restless, pacing the house at night, locking and relocking the doors, drawing the curtains shut even during daylight. Sometimes Daniel found her sitting in silence, her eyes fixed on nothing, as though she were replaying memories she could not escape. He realized then that she was not just hiding from her enemies. She was hiding from herself, from the choices that had brought her here. The elegant woman the town admired was unraveling, piece by piece, inside their walls. For Daniel, the strain became unbearable. His life had been ordinary once, predictable and calm. Now he was tangled in webs of fear and suspicion that were never his to bear. Yet despite knowing Emma had betrayed his trust, he could not bring himself to abandon her. Love bound him in chains stronger than logic. He felt pity for her fear, loyalty to their shared past, and a lingering hope that he might somehow rescue her from the ruin closing in. But deep inside, he knew he was no longer her partner in a love story. He was her shield, standing in the way of dangers she had created. The town remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in their midst. To outsiders, Daniel and Emma were still the picture of devotion, smiling together at gatherings, walking hand in hand through the market. No one could see the exhaustion in Daniel's eyes, or the fear hidden beneath Emma's forced grace. Their marriage had become a performance, staged for the world, while behind closed doors they lived in constant dread. Every day, Daniel wondered which would come first: the truth exploding into the open, or the past catching up to Emma in a way no one could stop. The night of the storm became etched into Daniel's memory like a scar that refused to fade. The rain hammered against the windows, the wind howled through the cracks of their old house, and yet the silence inside felt louder than any storm outside. When he stepped through the door, the first thing he noticed was the overturned vase, shards glittering faintly against the dim light. Then he saw the trail, the faint streaks of blood across the carpet, the half-drawn curtains swaying as though someone had rushed past it. His voice caught in his throat, unable to call her name. The dread inside him already knew the answer. Emma was gone. Hours passed in a blur of police sirens, searchlights, and questions that offered no comfort. Daniel stood by the lake, drenched in rain, as officers combed through the mud and reeds. It was there that they found her. The same lake where he and Emma had once spent carefree afternoons as children, skipping stones and making promises under the summer sun, had now become her grave. Her body lay still, the life in her eyes extinguished, the storm above raging as though nature itself mourned the cruelty of her end. Daniel's knees gave way, and for a long time he could do nothing but stare, unable to reconcile the lifeless figure with the woman who had filled his entire world. The investigation unearthed truths Daniel had already begun to suspect, but never wanted confirmed. Emma had not stopped playing her dangerous games, even within the safety of their marriage. Records showed secret calls to former associates, empty promises of money she never had, desperate bargains that only deepened her enemies' hatred. To them, Emma was not a wife or a lover. She was a betrayer who had crossed lines too many times to be forgiven. Her death was not random. It was the inevitable consequence of a life lived on borrowed time. The town reacted with hushed voices and mournful glances. Some people painted her as a victim, a woman destroyed by shadows larger than herself. Others whispered about her double life, convinced she had brought this fate upon herself. No one spoke too loudly, for the details of her past were too tangled, too shameful for the quiet town to bear. To Daniel, none of it mattered anymore. Whether she had been sinner or victim, manipulator or pawn, she had been the woman he loved since childhood, and her loss hollowed him out in ways words could never express. In the days that followed, Daniel lived as if moving through a dream he could not wake from. The house felt unbearably empty, every object reminding him of her presence. The locked box still sat in the drawer, its contents now meaningless. He avoided it, unable to face the evidence of the stranger she had been. Instead, he clung to the fragments of the Emma he once knew, the girl laughing in the fields, the woman walking down the aisle toward him, the fleeting smiles that made him believe their love was real. Yet deep inside, he carried the tormenting truth. He had never truly known her. He had married not just his childhood love, but also her secrets, her lies, and her darkness. And in the end, those shadows had destroyed them both.